And like there's all this talk about the gay lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to know what people think the gay lifestyle looks like. Like, do they expect all of us to go to circuit parties all the time and having poppers? Because, like, some of us do, but also some of us are, like, as boring as everyone else. Like, the truth is, in the same way there's no straight lifestyle, there really isn't a gay lifestyle.
Michael, what is a popper?
Oh my God, Aaron, you don't know what poppers are?
No, I'm sorry.
Um,
It's very funny that Edgar is laughing in the background.
yeah, Edgar is laughing at you in the background.
Welcome to My Brother, My Brother's Friend and Me, a podcast where two ex-evangelical siblings and an ex-Catholic non-sibling review Christian media and either praise or condemn it. This week, we watched the documentary For the Bible Tells Me So, about the fraught relationships between Christian parents and their queer children. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Michael.
And before Michael takes over, be sure to follow us on Twitter at MBMBFandme, and like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Also, we just wanted to mention Josh isn't able to be with us right now. We did record his recommendation for next week. We will drop that in here at the end of the episode. But Josh is otherwise occupied, so it's just going to be another me and Michael one. But Michael, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so I decided for, the end of Pride, I mean, we're recording this in early July, but Pride is all year long, that we should take a look at evangelicals and fundamentalists and their relationships with queer people. And so I focused a lot on how this was a good movie, and everyone, Aaron and my brother, seemed to think that I meant we're going to have a fun time.
You said that it was going to be like really fun dunking on people for not accepting gay people, and
yeah,
I mean there is that element to it, but it was very sad.
It is very sad, but so is the relationship between the church and queer people.
Fair enough.
So just some background. This is a 2007 documentary. It really is a documentary of its time. It is directed by Daniel G. Karslake. It has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes with some glowing reviews. And I actually just pulled the description straight from Rotten Tomatoes because I think that they do a good job of summarizing what this is. Grounded by the stories of 5 conservative Christian families, the film explores how the religious right has used its interpretation of the Bible to support its agenda of stigmatizing the gay community and eroding the separation between church and state. And I just love this concept because I feel like it's something we all know, but isn't really explored in media very often.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely interesting just to see, like, the very stark reality of, like, people who were raised with a very, literalist interpretation of the Bible, and then seeing them come to terms with the fact that, like, they have queer kids and, like, seeing what the religion that they were raised in, like, and raised their kids in does to them and their relationship. And we get a myriad of different responses. I mean, we get the parents who are able to square their beliefs with their kids. We get parents who change their beliefs because of their kids, and then we get parents who never get to reconcile. And I think this documentary, like, really does a good job of just, like, showing how this is, any number of scenarios can play out, but the main thing is that, like, the way that people have interpreted and misinterpreted the Bible, oftentimes willingly, has damaged countless queer people in the United States specifically.
Yeah, and I mean, I really actually do think of my picks, this might be the one that is grounded most in scripture and spends the most time talking about the Bible.
Yeah, it's not a Book of Enoch based movie, that's for sure.
I tend to pick things that are very loosely in our wheelhouse. But I really appreciate how this documentary opens, and it really opens and tells you what it's going to be. So we get the Anita Bryant being pied moment.
That's why tricked me about this because I was like, oh, this is gonna be funny. It's gonna be a bunch of people just dunking on homophobes.
Well, I mean, that's part of the documentary, but it's not all of it. For those of you who don't know, Anita Bryant is her full-time job is to be a homophobe. She's all about, like, basically saying that gay people aren't people and that they're awful and that, basically any of our queer identifying human beings should not get the same rights. And she's worked very hard for this. And there is a famous moment in which she's talking and she gets a pie thrown straight into her face. And it's my favorite thing.
It's just so weird watching her because like she continues to like be like, oh, let's pray for the homophobe or homosexual community that God will heal them, and like the whole time there's just like all this like whipped cream on her face. She looks like a ghoulish clown. It's really upsetting and funny.
It's amazing because, to be honest with you, it is probably the best way to derail anything she says because you stop listening to anything coming out of her mouth.
Nope, deplatforming and pieing in the face always works.
Yep, always. And so then we get some snippets of, talks from pastors about how homosexuality is an abomination. And I think now's a good time to mention this film, by being made in 2007, spends a lot of time talking about the gay community and just talking in a gay focus. And I think that was more of a relic of its time than an actual, like, non-inclusive conversation. Because for those of you who don't know, like, at the time, queer would have been a slur. So I think that they were careful to be fair and very, like, light and kind. But in doing so, they really do not talk about trans people. Mm-hmm. And they really touch on bisexuality, but only in passing. And I think that deserves to be noted at the top.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Like, it is so strange to think that we've come in the past 13 years, like, from queer being a slur to, like, being the kind of accepted term. And, I mean, just seeing this film from the perspective of a decade later just, like, shows the vast change we've seen in the United States. But, yeah, that is a good point, There is basically no discussion of trans folks, and I don't know if that's, intentional, but, like, that was really the discussion back in the late aughts was, just, like, gay and lesbian people specifically.
Yeah, and, I've been in a lot of queer Christian groups, and it seems that the experience is pretty universal. Like, if you're part of the queer community, the church, especially conservative churches, has probably treated you roughly the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like they're gonna be like, oh, you're gay. That's totally different.
Yeah.
To your okay.
Yeah, they definitely did not. they
didn't keep the kid gloves on with you, so to speak.
They, unlike our society, they don't have preferential treatment in the LGBTQ community. They just treat all of the same, and it's awful. So we get some more clips. We get to see Reagan courting the religious right. And, I've gone on many a Reagan rant on this podcast.
Yeah. If you want to see Michael make me cry over Ronald Reagan, watch our episode on AKA Jane Roe.
I just feel like whenever you and I come together, you cry.
Yeah, I'm worried about this one, to be fair. Josh isn't here to back me up.
I would have just made him cry too.
That's true, yeah.
So we open, the first family we talk to are the Robinsons. And we hear about the birth of their son. And so they had a child who was born with complications. They thought he'd never walk. And they desperately wanted him to be a preacher. And he starts talking about when he was a young kid, he knew there was something different between him and the boys he was friends with. Looking at a Playboy magazine, and he was like, this isn't doing anything for me. However, given the time that he was around, he was like, I'm also not coming out because of language that the church had used. And this made me laugh because I definitely had experiences like this as a kid where I'm like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about.
Did you ever have the experience where like all the guys in your school are like, "Oh man, this teacher's so hot. Oh yeah, I think she's super sexy," and then you're like,
I would just always be like, oh my God, yeah.
"Totally, I like
Yeah,
her
like
teeth."
I would be like, she has an impeccable sense of color coordination.
That's so
I
good.
mean, I just never knew what to say. So when he said this, I laughed. And in fact, like, something that I did find completely refreshing and charming about all of this is there were pieces of every story that I could relate to. So if you are a queer person who grew up in the church, I think there's some catharsis to watching this, and like moments like this of levity and moments of more seriousness, but it's definitely worth it. We flip to the next family, which features a woman minister, but it is not exactly a shining beacon of progressivism. And it is under this family that I go ahead and make the note, I think Christianity is a little too dour for me.
What part specifically made you think about that?
It was just more of a reflection of all of the moments with them in church, and like it always to hell and always talks about punishment, and like I don't know, I like to be light and have fun and like not focus on stuff like that. So
Yeah, I mean, it's really a marketing faux pas if you think about it. Just like, who wants to hang out in a place all the time where it's like, anyway, you're gonna suffer for eternity?
yeah, and like I don't know, I just always think like some of these messaging decisions Christianity has decided to do, especially fundamentalist, like conservative branches, where they're like, no, we need to preach fire and brimstone because that's what's saving people. No, it's not. I don't want to hang out with you if you keep telling me I'm going to hell.
Exactly. No, it's just bad advertising.
Yeah. And so unfortunately with this family, we get a quote that definitely has to be repeated and made me a little sick when it was stated, and it definitely set the tone of what we were going to be getting from this particular family. So the dad of this family says, when I had my two kids, he has a son and a daughter, he said, God, please don't let my son be a faggot or my daughter a slut. And he pauses and says, he didn't do that. He reversed it.
Yeah, it's like, cool, Dad. Good prayer.
Like, great. Great. Love that. Love that. And so then we get to meet the daughter, Tanya, and she is a figure that I find to be so sympathetic and so uplifting in spite of her surroundings, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just because she talks about how she has a really close relationship with her mother where they have a lot in common, and her mother's a minister, and how like there's a lot of love there and shared interest, and that led to fear of her coming out. Just that's tough. And she talks about how, her dad, when she even like tips her hat to it or, insinuates that something's even a little bit different, her dad is more receptive than her mom, where her mom is like, no, this is how things are. And I find this family's dynamics to be difficult and challenging, and I think that Tanya herself didn't have a support group outside of this, which we later learned she does. You could see this going down a really dark path, and thankfully it doesn't.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that, but just like I just feel like that is a story where it's like there's sometimes with queer people that we're like, you want to have this relationship with your parents, and like you care about them so much, but also like the whole problem of like you know that if you told them about a very important part of you, like it would just sort of shake the earth, and then like having to keep that from them is so damaging, and it's just like
it is.
It's just, that's the feeling I had from this whole documentary. It's just like, oh, this is so icky.
It's heavy, right? And it's like it's a ubiquitous heaviness that every queer person I know went through, whether their family was religious or not, whether their family was progressive or not, because even if someone is secular and progressive, there is, I describe it as you have to allow your family to mourn their expectations of you. And I mean that less biting than it sounds, but your parents have, when like from your conception, have this idea of what they want your life to look like. And it's often one that is easier than theirs, better than theirs. And, they want to probably had from childhood. And it often is a projection of like, you'll get married, you'll have kids. And there's this way of thinking that is the goal, right? And our society says that's the goal, so that must be what you want. And by coming out, you're shaking up that goal. Even if you want marriage and kids and everything else, you're throwing a wrench in it. So oftentimes I feel parents need that moment to mourn in a way that friends don't, other family often doesn't. And I think we see that front and center here, and we do see her parents through this discussion kind of go through stages of grief and mourning. At least that was my read on it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we get another family switch. We've got a lot of families in here. So we meet the Reetons. And I had to laugh because when the patriarch of this family is talking about how everyone in his family are pastors, so they wanted him to become one, I felt personally attacked.
Oh no, do you have a lot of relatable experience with that?
My dad is a pastor. My mother's father is a pastor. And we had 2 preachers on my dad's side of the family. Like one of his grandparents, I believe. Yeah, so there's a lot. And it was expected that either I or my brother would be a pastor. I think everyone was mood boarding that because I am such a type A person and like to be in control of things, I would be a pastor and he would be a youth pastor because he's goofy and funny.
Yes, the power couple of the Lutheran family.
So that's my personal comparison to this. However, unlike me, who just became a dirty heretic, this guy decided I am going to be a pastor. So they come from a long line of like a Lutheran family. The patriarch's dad performed the wedding ceremony between the matriarch and he. And then they cut to their son, Jake. So Jake is talking about his upbringing and about how he was under the impression everyone in the world was Christians. And Aaron, I wanted to ask you about this. I 100% had that perspective until late elementary school, probably.
Yeah, no, that was never the case for me. I went to I went to private school for both my elementary and secondary education. So like my kindergarten class had a Muslim person and a Jewish person, and a bunch of people who are non-Christians, atheists, secularists. Like we had a lot of different religions at my school. So, and also the fact that my mom comes from a country where primarily it's not Christian folks, it's Chinese and Indian folks. So like, I was never under the impression that Christianity was 100% of the world. I mean, I did think it was the majority of the world, but not so much that not to this degree, which is mind-boggling.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I had a pretty diverse school. I just still assumed that everyone was Christian.
That's very funny.
Like, I remember, like, some of the first conversations, I was like, oh my, cool. And that's probably not the reaction that my church would have wanted me to have, but I thought it was cool that other people weren't. And so Jake has an experience pretty early in his life, which who amongst us hasn't, where his church, the pastor at his church had a message about gay people. It wasn't great. It was the same thing that we often see in these churches where gay people are the beginning of the end of society. And relatable, hilarious story. I inspired one of those sermons one time.
Oh, that's not great.
In retrospect, hilarious.
I mean, it's a very cool thing to be like, yeah, I inspired someone to preach about the death of human civilization. But I feel like it's got to be more than just your sheer existence. Like, did you like burn down this pastor's car or something, or like date one of their sons?
No, his daughter's boyfriend did proposition me though.
Ooh, oh
no. He didn't know that.
Michael. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't.
And to be fair, one of the other boys in that church was my first sexual experience. So maybe there was a reason.
Okay, yeah, maybe you personally caused the downfall of that person's congregation, so.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, like.
Oh, you love to see it.
You know, he got up there for a solid hour and talked about how there was a same-sex prom king couple and how that was like the sign of the times and we should all be ready because the apocalypse is upon us. Revelation is going to happen. And it was a whole thing. And I couldn't help but feel like as the only queer person only out queer person in that congregation, as much as I was out at the time, like I had told a few of my peers, I was like, wait, this has got to be about me. But yeah, it was very relatable for me to see him being worried about the pastor preaching about homosexuality. Though, you know, who knows if he inspired it. I put this note here, and it's just me being shady, but I feel like I have to read it. Catholics and Mormons don't mind queerness. They just want us to be celibate.
I mean, you're completely right. That's what the catechism says. It's like, no, we love queer people. They just can't fuck.
Ever.
Because if you have sex and you can't make a baby with it, that's a crime. It's a holy crime. And man, I don't know that we have the time to get into the reasons why that is such a very bad, scientifically, theologically, just like morally position to hold. But like, it's one of the, gosh, I've told you before, like the Catholic position on queerness is why I'm no longer a believer in God, but like, what a place to start.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting because I've had like I have always had friends of like various different faiths, and something I like to do is to understand more. It's actually one of the reasons I have an entire book about religions, cults, and other beliefs that my dad gave me. And I've always been interested in like other people's viewpoints and like how it's different. So it always perplexed me when they were like, yeah, you know, our churches recognize people are gay. They just think you should be celibate forever. And it's just a little confusing because I'm like, okay, so you're not okay with it.
So you're not actually okay with it, is what you mean. Yeah. Because you don't know how people are, because people need to have sexual like, not all people, obviously, but a large majority of people do need to have some sort of sexual output. And if you want to put a restriction on that, you're going to have some problems, which the Catholic Church does, in fact.
Yes, it does. And, this could become an entire rant on the Catholic Church, but we'll save that for the documentary I have queued up about the Catholic Church, so.
Oh, no. All right, let's keep going before we burn all that material.
Yes. So next we get a prominent political family who's, you know, I should probably look up names before I pronounce them, but here we go. I'll pronounce it wrong. Who cares? The Gephards, who... if you guys are not familiar, the patriarch of this family was actually leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives before Nancy Pelosi.
Wow.
Yeah. He ran for president. He was a prominent socially conservative Democrat from the Dog Caucus, so was pretty socially conservative on things like, abortion, same sex, all of that. And we get another big quote here, and I feel like this is more your wheelhouse because this is a Catholic family. There were two things I knew were abominations: suicide and homosexuality.
We're going to talk about abominations later on.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I didn't get a whole lot of abomination talk as a Catholic. That word didn't show up too much in the sermons that I got. It was more just the suicide bit, where it's you probably shouldn't do that. Which, you know what? I can get behind. I can't get behind the theological, you're damned to hell forever if you commit suicide that the church did hold for a while. But, I feel like in general we should try to convince people to not die by suicide.
Yeah, and I mean, I always found it interesting because that's such a divisive talk, at least in the Baptist churches, where there was a real theological split in the congregations of whether they thought suicide was a sin or not. And I was subject as probably much too young, because Christianity loves talking about dark, depressing topics around children, where there would be people getting into theological arguments about suicide and whether one was damned to hell. And first of all, very heavy. Second of all, it just is fascinating to me that it's created that split. I got a lot of Obama, but because of that split, suicide was never included in the big bads. But homosexuality was definitely heavy feature on the abominations list. And so we get to talk to Missy, who is just so pleasant. I really like her. And she talks about how she just kept saying when she was single, maybe I just didn't meet the right guy. And that's so relatable because in high school and late middle school, really, I had a purity ring and I was like, this is the easiest choice I'm ever going to make. I don't want to have sex with a woman. I'll meet the right one and we'll get married and that'll be that.
Oh.
And I guess if we're going to be fair, I did keep part of that promise.
I mean, yeah,
so,
if it's not with a woman, it doesn't count as sex, right?
Right. That's the whole thing. So we flip back to Gene Robinson, who actually we get to see he got ordained. He had started going to therapy twice a week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm all for therapy. I have a therapist. I think it's the best experience for many of us. Twice a week is a lot, especially when the content is cure me of my homosexuality.
Yeah, not great. Not great.
No. And so he ended up meeting a woman, falling in love, and getting married. And I actually think this marriage really does talk about some of the messiness of human sexuality, which I think is worth us spending a moment on. In that there was legitimate love there. These two cared about each other deeply and had children, and there is something to be said about you can love someone in a way that you could talk yourself into being romantic even if it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think with I think there's two relationships in this documentary where there's a queer person and a non-queer person, and they get married, and they do that just because they feel like they have to. And this, it just shows not only does it show the fact that it is really gross the way that we make people cram people into boxes and say this is what your society wants, you should live it, and how that ruins families down the road. But it does show a wonderful spectrum of how you can care about someone very much, you can love them truly, and still never actually have sexual feelings for them, even, or do a sexual act like you're saying, and not actually, have your heart in it, so to speak. And it's very interesting to see the way that Christianity has sort of forced people to explore their sexual bounds, which is not something that Christianity is known for.
Yeah.
And sort of made a perversion of its own sexual mores, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it really is, I think, a feature, not a bug, when you have such a conservative view on sex and sexuality. You kind of force people to go out on their own and figure it out themselves, right? Because we ranked the books of the Bible, and if you're going off of Paul and Leviticus, which is what a lot of conservative strains of Christianity choose to do, you really get the message that sex is bad. And if you are a human who is a sexual person, you have the opposite experience of that. So you're like, well, I guess I'll figure it out for myself.
Yeah, definitely. It says, hey, this thing, you should do it, but only within a very small window of experience. And when you realize that you can look to the left and see that window is an open door, you're going to tend to go out that door. And, the church would, and religion and, everybody in general would do a lot better if they didn't try to cram people's sexual viewpoints, and instead, we're just like, hey, there's a lot of stuff you can do with this flesh machine of yours, and you got to do it safely.
And so now we go back to Tanya's family for a brief moment that made me roll my eyes. And it's because her mother says the whole, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Ugh. It's so annoying. I get so annoyed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just, keep checking your boxes.
I heard that so many times. It just is so reductive. And so then we get something interesting where we talk to a bunch of people, like, seemingly on the street, but it's pretty obvious that, like, these people were at least somewhat pre-screened so we could get a variety of views. So, we have some choice quotes, like, where people are talking about the Bible, and, one woman says, I know homosexuality is wrong because my church says so, and it's in the Bible, but I don't really analyze it. And that is honestly a big reason that I left the church, because I'm a pretty, like, inquisitive person, and I actually came out and lived life out, joined queer Christian groups, and, like, found communities of people who were Christian, and actually left the church much after coming out and coming to terms with that. And it was, interestingly enough, I think obviously the culture of homophobia has a very, very large role, but that is a natural evolution from the lack of curiosity that is promoted in a lot of mainline Christian groups. You're not really called to, like, question and ponder and really, look at something in a non-literal point of view. At least in Baptist churches, you certainly weren't.
Yeah, it's definitely a similar experience from the Catholic side, where, like, there are definitely people who will tell you that they're very open to questions and that they want you to ask questions, but they're going to give you the same sort of, like, church-approved answer, and you don't really explore any deeper into that, and that is kind of, it's disheartening, and for those who are genuinely intellectually curious, it sort of shuts that down. I do think it's very interesting that you continued after coming out, trying to look into your faith in the context of queerness. I think that's kind of admirable, but I also expect that it has something to do with, like, the fact that when you are a religious person, especially early on in your life, that becomes your identity, and it's sort of like trying to retain that part of yourself.
Yeah, and kind of figuring out, like, for me at least, there was some stubbornness of, like, no, this is something that can be true. Someone can be queer and Christian. And once I kind of realized, oh, I don't quite fit in this box, part of what I think led me to that freedom was also saying, sure, you can be queer and Christian, I just happen not to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then we actually get some fun Reverend talk. Desmond Tutu, which I'm so happy about. He's great. Just like always about love, always about like, a lot of I feel like Christians are split in between Jesus and Paul. And some really want to be like Jesus and some really want to be like Paul. And the ones who want to be like Jesus tend to just be like, who are we to even come up with something about homosexuality when the Bible really doesn't say very much on it? And, we get some really good quotes. Like, if you read the Bible at face value, you miss a lot. And then flat out, they're failing to read the Bible when speaking on homophobes. And as someone who has probably, no joke, read the Bible dozens of times, I can say that's true. I would read the Bible every night, and I have insomnia, so some nights I just wouldn't sleep, and that would be one of the books I would read into all hours of the night. And when you do a lot of deep diving, a lot of the very translations about mentions of homosexuality are either in Leviticus, which is such a buzzkill of a book and has a lot of rules that none of us could follow.
Yeah, about shellfish and, stoning your children to death.
And then the other ones are really taken out of really important context, because even when Paul is, and we'll get further into this, like even some of the things that Paul says, some of the things that he says in regards to homosexuality are taken out of context, and they lose a lot of meaning when you take it out. And I was really appreciative that they had like scholars of both the Jewish faith and the Christian faith talking about this, because I do think it's often lost that, Christians don't have to be phobic. Let's see here. So we also do mention, of course, Hebrew rules were about morality. They were about survival, which is another important context about the Old Testament. And then we flip to arguably the most depressing story in this entire documentary. Oh, Mary Lou. Yeah. So Mary Lou talks about herself, and, she's introduced kind of late compared to everyone else. And she talks a little bit about herself and about how growing up, everything in the Bible was to be taken literally. And I think this is some really bad theology that has killed a lot of people in history. And I'm not just talking about queer people. If you missed our episode ranking books of the Bible, this includes, defenses of slavery. This is all sorts of awfulness. The Bible has been utilized because of its literal language is translated pretty roughly into a version of English we don't speak anymore. So it's really easy to take out of context and make something bad. And Mary Lou gives us that, but we're going to get back to her. So we go to Jake, who knew he was gay in middle school. And he followed the same exact path of Jake, where around middle school, I was like, yeah, this is definitely a thing. He came out to his sister at 15, his parents at 16. I literally came out to my brother at 15, my parents at 16. So I really did relate, I think, most to his story. And his parents really didn't take it very well at first. They had to go through that process of, like I said, mourning their expectations for their son. They had their property literally defaced because people at school knew. And his mom thought that he would get AIDS, and that is because, the entire culture around AIDS was, oh, that's a gay person's disease, which is why the federal government did nothing about it for so long. And it kind of was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so that's a lot of people's worry.
The thing that I thought was very frustrating about this initial part of the Jake's story is the way that specifically his father reacted. Because, it was so annoying to be like, it made me so sad to hear my son was gay, and like the whole that's one thing when anybody is coming out to you, you can't make it about you, right? It is a personal thing. Even if your child, like even if you are 100% like fly a queer a trans flag in your front door sort of person, like if your kid comes out to you and is like, "Hey, I'm gay," you can't just be like, "Oh yeah, obviously," and then like make, because it is a big deal to them. It is our identity, and it is something that is very personal, and that there's a lot of rightful fear caught up in. And when parents are like, it just broke my heart because now all my, like you said, they're mourning their own expectations and not really looking 5 feet in front of them to see how their kid is doing. Like, it just irritated me to be like, dude, this ain't about you.
Unfortunately, though, it often is. Like, it shouldn't be. But, like, parents really struggle with, like, giving their child space to, like, say, hey, this was really tough. You know, it's a lot of queer people go through a delayed adolescence, and it's almost a universal experience whether you come out earlier or later, and it's because you kind of don't live those teenage years as freely until you come out. So a lot of, the reactions of the parents, unfortunately, were not surprising to me, even though they weren't the worst. I do think, like, that unfortunately is a common reaction when, all right, let's just have a public service announcement. If your kid comes out as gay or bi or any sort of queer, trans, I don't care what, you go, I love you and I support you. Work your shit out on your own. That's it. I love you. I support you. That's all your kid needs to hear. These are literal children. Like, he was only 16. That's still pretty young. And, I hate that, like, this family went through, like, windshields being broken in and, like, the not so fun F word being written in chalk on their driveway. And I really did feel for them, but I did find myself, and, correct me if this is the wrong way to think about it, I almost wondered, did this help the parents kind of realize we've got to be allies if this is how the world is reacting?
I think that's fair, right? Like, people, I mean, we're seeing something similar with the Black Lives Matter movement now. Like, people did not start really caring about police abolition until, like, white folks started getting their eyes burst by rubber bullets. Like,
yep.
It becomes, the fight for social justice becomes very different once you have personal stakes in it.
I think we see that really straightforward. So we flash back to Gene, and we talk a little bit about him and his wife. This is Robinson. And so he finally comes to terms with being gay and comes out to his wife. And they have the most heartwarming moment, and she had the most heartwarming reaction, where he comes out to her and is like, it's not fair for me to be with you when I'm not a heterosexual, and it's not fair for you to be with me when I'm not a heterosexual. Like, this just isn't, I'm not attracted to you in that way. Gene is a gay man. He's not sexually attracted to her. He loves her and wants to co-parent with her. And her reaction was just more or less like, yeah, you're the father of my kids. I love you. But, like, if that's the case, sure. And they have a wedding ceremony where they released one another from their vows.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. That was, of all the weird relationships that happen in this film, I thought that was the most, like, well handled, where, like, they were just like, yeah, I mean, we love each other, and we are friends, and we do care about each other quite a lot, but also, this isn't right for both of us. And they both, like, mutually came to that understanding and were like, hey, we should still do whatever we can to, make our family work, but, like, we shouldn't also be married to each other. Like, it's, if you're gonna have a dissolution of your marriage, like, that's the best way to go about it.
It honestly has to be the most amicable divorce we've ever seen. So we flip back to Chrissy, and so she talks about her relationship with her husband. And so Chrissy got married because she was with this guy for a long time, basically. How she talks about it is she got married to him because they were together for a while. Her family liked him. They got along, and it was kind of like the next thing to do. And I think, unfortunately, that's a really common occurrence, especially, in the land before legalized gay marriage. I think a lot of people were like, well, there's no option for me to marry, for me to come out. I think it's important to contextualize at this time, public opinion was not so rosy on same-sex couples. And so I think a lot of people just, well, this is what everyone does. And, she talks a lot about how they were so friendly and how much they got along. And it's really not how you talk about a significant other. It's how you talk about a bud.
Yeah, just like
Erin,
a good friend from
with
school.
love, she kind of talks about her husband how I would talk about you. Like, we have a lot in common. We get along.
Yeah, we have very similar interests. We make each other laugh.
Is there anything else? And no, there was nothing else.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then we get another cut to like the pastors talking. And I, again, was stricken by this amazing quote. There are so many in this, about what a pastor says when someone says, that's what the Bible says. And he goes, that's not what the Bible says. It's what it reads. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
more
that
of that,
rules.
please.
It's such a good way. Yeah, it's such a good way to contextualize all the weird shit in the Bible. It's like, well, the literal words on the page are not exactly what you want to be going for. It's a historical document like any other, and you can't just read the Declaration of Independence without knowing what the hell is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, it's just kind of an abdication of responsibility to say, well, that's what the Bible says.
Exactly. No, it's the end of, having an intellectual and honest discussion. It's like, oh, well, this is what it says, so I don't have to do anything else.
Yep. And so then we get some really interesting thoughts from these ministers where they talk about how, Jesus says to give away all of your wealth and come join me. And that's pretty straightforward, and we don't see people doing that left and right. So when people are talking about taking the Bible literally, they're not.
Yeah, definitely. I liked that too. It's like, no, Jerry Falwell never literally gave up all his shit.
Well, and this doc did not pull any punches because it literally listed the net worth of mega pastors.
Yup.
It made me applaud. I literally applauded. And because this film doesn't want us to get too comfortable, we're going to cut back to Mary Lou.
Yeah.
And so her daughter comes out to her in a letter, and Mary Lou reads the letter and then responds instantly, which is just a mistake in of itself, but basically just on her daughter and says, like, this is not you, this is not how you were raised, this is not good, you're like, I will never get over this, I can never be okay with this. And then at the end signs it, love, Mom. And it's just such a thing that you get organically when you say, love the sinner, hate the sin. This is what you get from that. It's like a direct consequence of that sentence.
Yeah, it's very much, that's, love is, being, saying that you love them and then doing nothing else and actively, trying to tear down everything else around them. It's gross and it sucks.
I mean, it's just such an easy thing. Like, it really leads to dark places. And I think, unfortunately, with Mary Lou's story, you can see the direction it's heading pretty early. Or at least I did.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to think about it,
yeah.
But, like, I wasn't surprised.
I think it was in this moment I said out loud to myself what is going to happen later. I'm not doing that to you listeners. You have to buckle up and stay tuned. We flip back to Tanya's family, and it's just another rough rough time, where Tanya's mom said that when she came out to her, she said, "That's not the way she was born. I know that she chose this." And is just talking about how it's a sin. And incidentally, the father, who was very comfortable with saying faggot earlier, is the one who is more comfortable with it. And, he says something along the lines of, I mean, I don't understand it and I'm not okay with it, but that's my daughter and I love her. And if my choices are, like, be active against this and lose my daughter, that's not what I'm choosing. And it's just rough. When that is like your best case scenario, you're in for a rough time. And I just find it to be a hard story to watch and listen to.
One thing, I don't know if you have any insight on, but I do feel like even today, it is easier for women to be out homosexuals than it is for men. And I think I don't know if that's based in fact. I just feel like that people are more accepting of lesbians than gay men. And I think a lot of that has to be, is caught up in patriarchy and how, there is a male fantasy about, finding women who are attracted to women, something that you can exploit for your own sexual pleasure. Do you have any insight into that?
So unfortunately, I could go on an hour-long tirade about this. Yes, I absolutely find it to be true. Same-sex interaction, like sexual encounters, are criminalized between men in many countries around the world, but there is not a country in the world that criminalizes as severely women having sex. So it's not only like borne out anecdotally, it's borne out in laws where there are countries on this planet where if two men are caught having sex, they are put to death. If two women are caught having sex, it's like having a traffic ticket.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah, and I absolutely think it's patriarchal. I think it's what you said, but I also think it comes from almost more sinister and like psychologically deeper even than a fantasy. A lot of homophobia's roots come from this fear of men being emasculated, and what could be more emasculating than a man fucking? Like, that's the mindset. And because of that, it is like the greatest fear. And oftentimes I found anecdotally, at least, the macho men who have this like, radiate toxic masculinity tend to be the ones who are most homophobic and afraid of gay people. And I often muse, are you just afraid that a gay man is going to treat you like you treat a woman?
Yeah. I do wish Josh was here for this part because, like, I think there is, like, a historical background, like, specifically with the Romans, like, it was okay for a Roman man to take a male partner as long as they were, using the parlance of today, the top, right? Because of the thing you said of, like, the fear of emasculation, of the way that, treating a man like you would a woman. And yeah, like we also, we get into that later on in the doc where they talk about how, we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah and the use of, male on male rape as a way to humiliate enemies. That's, there is historical reasoning for this weird fear of gay men having sex. It's the fact that it continues in our society is a major bummer.
It is. And, you're right. I do think there are some interesting history there. And I know some of it, but not as much as him. So I feel like we'll have to get his thoughts.
I'm sure we'll get them at some point.
Yes. We are about to, and I feel like everyone needs to be buckled up for this, get a radical, remarkable change in tone.
It's wild.
So every review I read, they warned about a cartoon that derails everything and that has aged incredibly poorly. And I laughed the entire time through this. I didn't listen very much during the cartoon. So we get a cartoon that walks you through homosexuality. I only wrote down one of their names because I was literally laughing so hard I had tears in my eyes. And the one that I wrote down is Martha because I love her. She is our lesbian. And so they talk about how basically they're refuting every argument that one may have to be homophobic. And so it starts with, all of the animal species that we know that engage in same-sex acts. And just to save you some time, it's most of them. And then they talk about a study, and this study has actually been recreated and holds up. So I do think there's some there where there are 3 markers that often contribute to whether or not someone is homosexual in particular. So a gay man, because of our patriarchal society, we don't do as many studies about women and, God forbid, trans people. So we don't have data here. But genes, hormones, and birth order tend to dictate. And basically for every older brother you have, you are more likely to be gay. And there's a lot of theories about this, and none of them have quite been proven, but the study has been recreated. But they show it through a ridiculous It is the most 2000s thing I've ever seen.
It's very funny. Like, you can see, like, they show, like, this family that has, like, 5 sons, and, like, it shows, like, the camera pans down through, like, the oldest to the youngest, and you could see them getting, like, more and more, like, effeminate. And, like, there's a very fun shot of, like, the last son in the womb, where, like, they're talking about how the theory is that, like, the mother is trying to feminize the fetus in utero. And like you could see the mother's like hormones like going on the fetus, and then like the baby sort of like grows long eyelashes and like winks at the camera. It's just like so funny.
It's just so ridiculous. And I don't know how. Sometimes I think about like production and like what it's like to be a producer on these things. I can't imagine this passing through multiple people and them going, "Yep, we gotta keep this in. This is a winner."
It doesn't make any sense in the context. Like, the doc loses nothing if you cut this out.
Nope.
Like, but they just threw it in there to pad for time, I guess. It's really good.
Yes. And they make comparisons with how, like, it is actually not completely genetic, yet we no longer persecute people who are left-handed. And I'm glad that they included we no longer do that.
Yeah, that's good. We like that.
Yes.
I was pleasantly surprised to see this cartoon because for some reason I had actually seen it before, like when YouTube was still new. Like, that was one of my first exposures to like an anti-homophobia argument on the internet, and I was like, oh, well, guess I'll have to think about that in 5 years.
That's amazing. I love the idea of this being the seed of what makes Aaron an ally.
Yeah, this cartoon specifically, it's really good. It's good shit.
So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does need to be in there. So we are going to flip back to Tanya's family. And she watches this talk show that we get clips of.
Oh, yeah.
And before we get serious, I have to say something. These men... Have you ever seen Spy Kids?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
These men remind me of the thumb men.
Yeah, because they're so
Spy
fucking
Kids.
wide.
Like, they're so wide. And their heads are so tiny on their bodies.
It was really upsetting. Like, I'm sure they're great people, but they were horrible to look at.
It was just hard to look at them. And everyone kept talking about how handsome they were. And I'm just like... I'm worried.
Yeah, no, like, guys, are you okay?
Like, you can skip a day at the gym, I promise.
Yeah, just go for a jog or something.
But Tanya's mom watches this segment about these gay men, and they actually have a really, really, really good message where people are asking them one of the most annoying questions. Which one of you is the man and which one of you is the woman? And they respond in the only way a same-sex couple really can. Well, we're both the men because we're gay and we're attracted to other men.
Yeah.
It's the binary is such a bitch because even in same-sex couples, which it's all in the title, you don't really have to go digging much deeper. People are obsessed with which is the man and which is the woman, and like what box do you check, and like, you know, who does the cooking and who does the cleaning, and things that are just so wrapped in societal expectations. And I always find it funny whenever a queer person is asked that, because every single time we all make the same face where we're like, do you understand?
Like, y'all, you can... No, you've done a bad job and you should be ashamed.
And so she actually admits something that's pretty powerful, and I think it's her biggest moment of being like really likable in this and like being a sympathetic figure, where how she realized she was obsessing with her daughter's sex life, and how she mentioned something that she realized that that quote unquote everyday people are gay, and that she was the one that was obsessed with like what her daughter's sex life looked like, as if her daughter would ever want to talk about that with her mom.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's not a conversation anybody wants to have with their parent.
Like, come on now. And I gotta put this one in here. When a queer child comes out to straight parents, it really does seem like a very sex-focused like conversation, in a way that like a heterosexual, you know, child bringing an opposite sex significant other home wouldn't bring. And like there's all this talk about the gay lifestyle. And I just want to know what people think the gay lifestyle looks like. Like, do they expect all of us to go to circuit parties all the time and having poppers? Because like some of us do, but also some of us are like, you know, as one of the reverends says later on, as boring as everyone else. Like, the truth is, in the same way there's no straight lifestyle, there really isn't a gay lifestyle.
Michael, what is a popper?
Oh my God, Aaron, you don't know what poppers are?
No, I'm sorry. It's very funny that Edgar is laughing in the background.
Yeah, Edgar is laughing at you in the background.
We don't. You don't have to explain that to me if you don't want to. Maybe when I'm older.
I feel like, no, I have to explain this to you, but I'm going to pull up the Wikipedia article so I can give you a very technical explanation.
Good.
I've killed Edgar. He's dying.
He's dying. Save your partner.
He'll be fine. So, poppers are a drug that is pretty common amongst the gay community. And so they're like these little bottles that you open up and you sniff them. And they like give you a high and like loosen up your muscles. And it's like mostly to make like sex easier and like more comfortable, and basically like, you know, loosen you up. It's really popular amongst in like raves, but they have these like really recognizable bottles. I'm going to drop one in our Skype chat so you can see. But yeah, like they're an inhalation situation, and they are very, 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 very common. And they're often a way to get around drug laws because they're not illegal in most places.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you for educating me. I don't know that I'll keep this in the podcast, except for maybe me asking and then
yeah, I feel
Edgar
like that
losing
part
his
at least
mind.
has to stay in. Glad I got to explain poppers to you. I need to send you
Great,
after
thank you.
all of this. There is a moment where Carly Rae Jepsen says gay rights with poppers in her hand.
Great.
And it is the queerest thing I've ever seen.
Excellent. That knowledge will help me during my game tomorrow.
Oh, it's Charlie XCX. It's not Carly Rae. Carly Rae did other mentions of poppers, but it was Charlie XCX.
Great. Okay. Excellent. I'm learning so much. This podcast is a cultural exchange. Please continue.
I'm glad.
Sorry for being unbearably straight.
It is totally okay. The amount of times I've had to explain to straight people what poppers are compared to gay people who all know what they are, it's pretty hilarious.
Great.
So we flash back to Gene Robinson, and he is now in a relationship with a man named Mark. And the parents are really unsure about Mark, even though he was there for Gene's kids. And, you know, the kids love him. And in fact, Gene early in their relationship was like, look, you can't have just me. You're having me and my children. And Mark was like, cool, that sounds great. And so actually his parents did something that I found very responsible, where they said they bought a bunch of books and started doing a bunch of reading about gay people.
I mean, I love that. Like, I don't love their initial response to Mark, but, like, the fact that they took the time out and was like, okay, I guess we have to learn about this. Like, if anybody in the United States society or society at large, like, just took the time to be like, oh, this is an issue that I don't understand and I have complicated feelings about, I'm gonna read about it. We would live, like, it's like one of those memes where it's like society if X happened and it's just like a future city.
We'd all be doing poppers in the street together. And his dad even says God made him that way. And it was really sweet. Well,
there we go.
So then we get to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah.
Excellent.
And Aaron, can I be honest with you? This is one of my favorite misunderstood stories in the Bible because it's pretty textually honest about what the whole thing's about. And people have still gotten the wrong message out of it. And I find that kind of funny.
Intentionally so.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. God leads us off with, hey, I'm going to destroy these cities because they're wicked and hospitable. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's the whole story of let's go in and try to find, you know, righteous people in this city. And you have a culture at the time where best thing you could be is hospitable, right? Like if someone comes to your house, you offer them a seat at the table, some food, and a place to sleep. And so Abraham and some angels are there, and we get the famous line, let these men come out so we can know them. And this is a line that's kind of ambiguous, first of all. And what I really like about this documentary is instead of just talking about the ambiguity, they say, fine, let's agree with you that these crowds of people want to rape these angels. Fine. We'll cede that ground to you and then still pick apart their argument where, like we said earlier, this was about power and this was about like humiliation. This was not about anything resembling consensual, right? Like I wrote in my notes, it's not like these men were lined up like waiting to take turns courting these angels, right? Like,
yeah, no, they're not asking them out.
Right. This is not like, hey, we all want to go on dates with you. And I think an important part in all of this is God was planning on destroying the cities before this even happened.
Yeah.
This was the last straw. This was already in the cards. God was like, I'm doing this. And so I found that like interesting. I like how this goes on this little rant, and then we switch over to Romans and Paul. And we all know I don't like Paul, but we do break down a little bit about some contextualizing about what Paul's talking about in regards to same-sex relationships, in particular talking about sex work in temples, and breaking down even something bigger. The words natural versus unnatural are probably better translated as customary versus uncustomary.
Mm-hmm.
So in a generous read on this, Paul's basically, instead of being like virulently homophobic, he goes, I don't know about any of that over there. And that's a very, 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 very different point of view. And his reference to same-sex relationships was from that, religion/sex work point of view, not in terms of like a loving couple. And I'm glad that the documentary spent a moment there, because a lot of people, like, I think Christians could have some arguments, right, and say that their religion is inherently a homophobic one, but I think that we should still hold them accountable and make them do the work to defend that point. And I appreciate this.
I mean, I really liked this part of the doc because, like, it showed the inherent weakness in all the arguments against homosexuality that I was taught. Like, when in school there was like one class I had that I remember where somebody was talking about why it's not okay to be gay, and like the teacher was like, okay, well, if we have gay people, if we allow gay relationships, then what's to say we shouldn't allow for straight relationships between men and children, like boys, like pedophilia basically. And my classmates rightfully were like, that's not the same thing at all. Yeah. And then like they're like, my teacher was like, well, what is the age cutoff? And then they're like, well, it's the same age cutoff for like straight people. Like, what are you talking about? And then like he went on to be like, well, what if your dog is like horny and is backing up on you, like, is that the same thing? And like, it's so purposefully obtuse about the nature of like what a consensual adult relationship is. It's not even like trying to tackle that conversation. It's just like, no, because I don't agree with this, I'm going to take it completely to the opposite end of the spectrum and be like, oh, this is actually what we're talking about, not this completely normal thing that you're trying to have this conversation about.
And I mean, the whole pivot to pedophilia with arguments against homosexuality is not new. And it's something that's really pervasive in our society, and it is not borne out in any data, right? Like, as someone who's a bit of a true crime junkie, I wish I had this data like right out of my head. But when you look at arrest rates, crime rates, all of the above, crimes of pedophilia are overwhelmingly straight men. Overwhelmingly. And overwhelmingly white straight men at that. Like, way more than any other group. And this whole, well, if homosexuality is allowed, and this idea that homosexuals are preying on children, is this fear tactic that comes out of a like toxic masculine culture, again, about like, the worst thing that can happen to you is being emasculated, right? And then also rolls up into a scare tactic that doesn't really need to be real because it sounds scary. And it's just, it's such an annoying pivot because you call it obtuse, and that's the best way to put it. It's just stop being so annoying.
Just completely not meeting you on the same level.
Right.
It's a good time.
Anyway, we flip back to Chrissy, and she's worried about her dad's political career because, like I said, he was a social conservative from the state of Missouri, and he was running for president. Her mom was not at all surprised that she was gay. And her parents were actually like really quick to just kind of say, oh, what we taught was wrong, was obviously wrong. We love you. And I just found it so nice because I have to imagine her mom must have told her dad, like, I think this, because it sounds like those two already did like the emotional work they had to do before she even came out.
Yeah, like they had killed their expectations long before, so they're like, okay, yeah, it's cool.
And they do the whole, oh, we were worried about like what the world would be for you. And like everything in this documentary, I want to spend a minute on that because I actually think that the source of it is a really sweet, kind place, but I don't think it is often from an altruistic point of view. I think oftentimes when especially parents are bringing up I'm so afraid of you being discriminated against and all of that, they're making an argument that wouldn't your life be easier if you were A, closeted, or B, not gay? And so unfortunately the answer is yes, and I'm still here coming out to you. Like that tends to be the reaction of queer people in this situation of, yeah, you don't think I don't know that? And I think oftentimes, unfortunately, that's where it comes from. And it did kind of like sully a otherwise pretty cute moment between these parents where they were accepting. I feel that there are stages of acceptance, and that is much further along than the no, you're not born that way, you chose this. But it is not to the level of I fully embrace you wholeheartedly.
Definitely. It's you get a B.
Yes.
On acceptance.
Yes. You get a B on acceptance and being an ally. So we go back to Jake. And so he was put in therapy by his parents. His parents did the whole Jake thinks he's gay. His sister was like, no, he just is gay. And his parents were really...
like, what is the difference between thinking you're gay and being gay? Like, y'all...
It all comes back to, like, whether or not it's a choice and a decision you make. So the idea of, like, thinking you're gay is, like, you have along the line made the choice that this is, like, the path you're taking. So you can go backtrack, and undo that. And it's just fucked up.
Yeah, that's no good.
At least he had his sister who was just like, you guys are being ridiculous. And this is where I wish my brother were here, because I came out to him at the same time and he thought the same thing. He was like, no, you just are gay and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with it. And anyone who's got a problem, they're dumb. And that's literally what Jake's sister is like. And it's so cute. And so we flip over to focus on the family, and I just see red when I see that group, and I start going on rants. So I don't even put that there's a transition. I don't put that there's a scene cut. I just say focus on the family is a hate group.
Yeah, they suck.
Yes. They get into the whole destruction of families by gay people, to which my response was, I don't know, sounds like a lot of work to break down the family unit.
Honestly, Michael, like, you have a job, your partner has a job, like, how do you find the time to break down society and destroy the fabric of the nuclear family?
Aaron, that's where the poppers come in.
Excellent. Damn it, now we have to leave that in.
You're welcome.
Crap.
This is what you get with a podcast with just me. We either talk about abortion or drug use.
Oh, I'm crying again.
So Focus on the Family likes to compare gay people to Nazis, which is just a steaming pile of irony for those of us who know about history.
Who know anything! God damn it!
Yeah, it's not like the pink triangle was a thing and queer people weren't rounded up routinely. But anyway, every psychologist that was interviewed thinks the founder of Focus on the Family is just the most ridiculous human being to ever walk. Like, they sound like they were just asked, like, presented you the meaning of life, and it's just like Crayola scribbles on a paper. And they're like, no, this is absurd. That's how they talk about his theories about homosexuality. They're like, this is not science. This is not psychology. Why are we talking about this?
I think it's very funny that he goes by Dr. Lou Dobson. Like he's not just constantly spewing horse shit from his mouth every time he opens it.
Look, guys, if you want to be believable, just get a doctorate. So you can claim you're a doctor. You could be, a doctor of anything, but it makes you more
It's
believable.
not that hard. You can get them online.
And so we're about to have a very, 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 very dramatic turn in tone again. So I just wanted to warn everyone, including Aaron here, because I need to warn you too.
Yep, this is the point where I texted you. I was like, oh, I thought this was a fun documentary, and you're like, nope.
So Mary Lou, so I had already kind of come to this conclusion. So my first note, and all of my notes are just my stream of consciousness, because I feel that I can just give you my raw thoughts here. I just wrote, can't imagine this story ends well given the framing. And so Mary Lou has said that her daughter has completely disowned her, doesn't talk to her. And Mary Lou is being, kind of obstinate and being like, why is my daughter not talking to me? And, it's not like she just like reamed into the fact that her daughter was gay. And so then Mary Lou gets a call late in the night, and we find out that her daughter has committed suicide. And, it's an important note that, like, one reason I found this particular doc to be important for us to talk about is that bad theology led to this, right? Like, bad Christian practices directly led to a mother saying, eternity is at stake, so I'm going to choose gay, who then made the daughter internalize all of that and led to the end of her life. And, it kind of harkens back to what Chrissy said earlier, where the two abominations are homosexuality and suicide. And if you give people that message, there is that sense of, when you're in a dark, depressed state, well, I'm already damned to hell. Mm-hmm. And
what are you going to do? You can't be double damned.
Right. Like, I'm not going to hell twice. And so it unfortunately led to this situation. And, it did do something remarkable in Mary Lou, where she kind of had a change of heart that we're going to go over in more detail later. But her daughter is dead, and that's really where we leave it before we switch to the next family. And, it's something that unfortunately is super common, and gratefully our society is not the place it was even 13 years ago, but this is real, and I'm glad they included it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important because, like you said, right, this woman is dead because of Christianity. Right, like there's when I was first starting to realize that I wasn't religious anymore, and I read a lot of Richard Dawkins, a lot of Christopher Hitchens, and they are the class of atheists that describe themselves as militant atheists, right? They're people that want to destroy the religion and remove it from all society. And as time has passed, I've realized that Richard Dawkins is probably not somebody who holds the moral high ground. I've sort of moved away from that, but I think that if there's ever an example for a reason why religion should be erased from society, it is the fact that it kills people, especially queer people, especially trans people, especially young queer and trans people. It is a part of all sects of Christianity that they do not adequately address the fact that they are killing their queer youth, and it it is a disgrace that there is not a bigger conversation within the church about what they can do to prevent their youth from dying by suicide. Because, and I suspect that's because if they had to confront that, they would have to accept their queer youth, and they refuse to do that, and such they sacrifice their children on this altar of dogma.
Well,
and it's
and
disgusting.
that's instantly where my brain went, is the refusal to do that is simply because they know that there are two choices: continue on this path and have, queer people in particular be at the, sacrificed to their religious views, or they can save people's lives and change their religious dogma. But it's something I always say: when eternity's at stake, you can really constitute a lot of shitty behavior.
Yeah, it's bad.
And we're gonna get, incidentally, another remarkable shift in tone. So we cut back to Jake. His parents instantly were worried about him coming out, and then realized from the bullying and like the property destruction and all of that didn't really matter if he officially came out, because enough people knew to terrorize him, and that led to accepting him, and they lead a protest together. And I love this, because his mom suddenly becomes this like radicalized activist who is going out there like leading chants and enacting policy change.
It's such a good redemption arc.
Really funny. And like, my parents had like a less than stellar reaction, but especially my mom has since like made that one of her issues. And it is really relatable to see where, like, I think parents kind of find their way to apologize to queer youth for like things said before they came out or during. And personally, activism is my favorite one, because you're walking the walk. And I loved seeing this mother up there just like, leading the charge and fighting the good fight.
Yeah, it's really good. There's a shot. I mean, they're actually from Indiana, I believe. So they like lead this march in Indianapolis against this focus on the family thing. Like, they go out to like try to deliver this letter to Lou Dobson, and like Lou Dobson like shits his pants and calls the cops, and then like it's like, no, we're closed today. Please don't come talk to me. And like the three of them, the Jake and his mom and his dad, like all get arrested because like the cops like, hey, we're gonna have to arrest you if you come on this property because you'll be trespassing. They're like, well, fuck it, yeah, civil disobedience, and they do it. And it's such a stark contrast from that guy from AKA Jane Roe and like other people we've seen who are just like, oh, please arrest me, I want to suffer for my faith, I want to feel like I'm persecuted. Like, this is a very clear intentional act. Like, no, we get what we're doing, but like we're doing this because like it is a cause we strongly believe in. It is not in any way performative. I think it is like a much better demonstration of like what activism should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually not the last time it happens, because Jake ends up getting arrested for trespassing at Liberty University.
Oh, good.
Because they didn't want him there speaking, because Liberty University really wants to work to keep queer people out of history and out of existence. And actually tried to enlist during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And
oh, really?
Yeah, like as he was already out. This was like in 2000, I'm not remembering the year, but it was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. And so he tried to enlist in the National Guard with a group of gay friends, just to kind of like show how ridiculous the policy was.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, we actually don't want more soldiers. Like, America saying we don't want more soldiers is such a horseshit.
It's honestly kind of hilarious. And the whole, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of churches employ a Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy where they actually don't want to deal with it. So they would rather you just not say anything. And, it's just always a ridiculous thing of like, if you know it about someone and they're living it, experiencing it, why does putting it into words change anything? And that's the inherent ridiculousness of don't ask, don't tell.
It makes them dangerous, right? If they're in the closet, right, you don't have to deal with, you can
Yep.
pretend they're not there. But when a person is out and, it makes that perceived threat concrete, which is, I guess, why don't ask, don't tell policies are still, employed, because like there is a level of like, oh hey, we accept them, we just don't want it to be like a whole thing. But like if somebody's out and they're like, hey, no, it's a thing now, we're gonna have this talk, like that makes it much harder. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah.
that's definitely the crux of it, right? So we get to see Gene Robinson again, who gets ordained as the first queer Anglican minister who is out. And you love to
Aw.
see it. But then you see something that is unfortunately not surprising. So right as he's being confirmed, conservatives within the church are trying to pin allegations of sexual misconduct against him.
Yeah, it's no good.
And I thought we should actually spend a moment and talk about what those allegations are. And this is from the person who accused him of it. The man said that on one occasion, the reverend squeezed his arm, and on another, taking a photo with him and had his hand on his back, not on his butt, on his back, and said that he lingered there for too long.
Cool. Good.
Yeah, and those were the sexual assault, like the sexual misconduct reports. And I have a lot to say, but I'm just gonna say very little. I do wonder what would be different if this were not an out gay man, and I wonder if this were a woman, would this have even been a point in discussion?
Yep.
So yeah, he actually creates a total schism in the church where, you have the conservatives in the church going, no, we cannot be permissive to gay relationships, especially in the clergy. And then everyone else is like, okay, but these people are already serving. This just gives them the opportunity to come out. And yeah, it literally created a schism in a church. I thought I created drama at church, but I didn't cause an entire organization to be cleft in two.
Something to aspire to then.
Dreams.
We gotta have them.
And so Reverend Irene Monroe, we cut to her, and she actually talks about a lot of what we talked about earlier, so I'm not going to hit on it, but it's about how homophobia stems from the patriarchy and mentions basically everything that we talked about, and how homophobia is literally the fear of other or the feminine. And I just find all of that very interesting, especially in a religion like Christianity, which has this interesting dichotomy of there is like the extolation of a lot of masculine tendencies. God is mentioned in the masculine. Jesus is the Son of God. But then on the other hand, most early followers were women. We spend a lot of time thinking about Mary as the mother of God. We also think a lot about Mary Magdalene, the only woman who was amongst Jesus's chosen followers. So I find that all very interesting in context of Christianity. And back to Mary Lou. And it's just, Mary Lou's, I think, is the only story that goes through these very dramatic moments and feels like there's resolution to. I felt like the other stories I would love to see catching up. I have no doubts about what Mary Lou is doing today. So she is inspired by the loss of her daughter to do studying and kind of do what we've seen other parents do, where she researched the Bible, And she realized in her studying, albeit too late, that homosexuality was not a choice, and that a lot of what she was taught was wrong, and decided to become an activist against homophobia. And it's really inspiring to see. It's also just, it's so clouded by the fact that, her daughter literally had to die for her to see this. And it's difficult. But, I mentioned in AKA Jane Roe how my hope for people who do harm is to be, for the rest of their natural life, kept awake by that harm that they've done and work to undo it. And I think Mary Lou is a perfect example of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about redemption arcs, right? Like the classic, at least in on Twitter, example of a perfect redemption arc is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? It is because he does the work, right? We see that he does wrong things, but he does spend a lot of time working on himself and becoming, a better person. And this is obviously not analogous so far as being the same situation, but like the thing about forgiveness that the church doesn't really tell you is that it's not as easy as just saying, God, I'm sorry, and then all things are forgiven, right? True forgiveness means having to deal with the fact that like your actions will have consequences you cannot reverse, and that will haunt you and many others for the rest of your life. And I think that Mary Lou, does take that into account. She's like, yeah, my kid's dead. I'm never gonna fix that, and I'm always going to be regretful for that. And in some ways, I mean, you can't, she does deserve that, right? Unfortunately, her actions resulted in the death of her child. There's no getting around that. And at the same time, right, she learned from that experience, from her own crime, and is trying to make the world a better place, to make it so that no one else has that experience that she did, that nobody else kills their kid because of an ideology. So I think it's a really good story to include this example, because it shows the complexity of like the fact that like, hey, sometimes you don't get to say goodbye. Sometimes you don't get to close the door. Sometimes closure isn't closure. It's just, forgiveness is not an act. It is, a lifestyle. And I think that Mary Lou sort of inhabits that in, for whatever you can say for something like this, she does the best she can. And that is to be commendable. And also, I would not blame anyone for not forgiving her for what she did.
Yeah, and I feel like that, if the point of like atonement is just working for forgiveness, it's not really atonement.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Like that's that's the whole problem with sins and confession. It's like, well, if I could just say I'm sorry and then keep doing the same sin, like it's not really the point.
Right. Don't say that to Protestants. So we have another dramatic change, and we get to see Chrissy again, and her father is running for president. And I love this because this happened in 2004. It was one of those elections that like will end up in history books, especially once we start talking about queer people in history books. Because you had the incumbent president who was running on a platform of making a constitutional amendment, making marriage between a man and a woman.
Oh, DOMA, yeah.
So DOMA was, just some history here, DOMA was actually a compromise bill that Democrats put up to like assuage Republicans to prevent need for a constitutional amendment. And the idea behind DOMA is we can overturn DOMA. So it was like this, Faustian bargain where you're making a deal with the devil to try to save yourself damage down the road. And it worked. Like, that's the thing. We're in a world where we find out that actually was the best way forward. But George W. Bush was saying DOMA doesn't do enough. We need a constitutional amendment. It's happening. You have a Democratic candidate with a openly gay daughter, and you actually had the vice president's daughter, Dick Cheney's daughter, Mary, who came out as gay also. So in the midst of this national conversation about banning and making sure in the US that marriage is between a man and a woman, you actually have a lot of gay people inhabiting the political conversation, and I find that very interesting.
Yeah, man, 2004. What a year.
What a year. So we flip back to Tanya, and you can see that, like, she really does want her family's affirmation and approval, and they just, like, outright refuse. And it's really bleak and it's really sad. But I think, similar to the case of Mary Lou, I'm glad that this story is in here, because there are some parents who never come around to accepting, and unfortunately that means queer kids are kind of left to navigate, do I keep my parents in my life, and under what, context?
Yeah, it's this whole doc is just like such, we get nice moments like where we do get Jake's family like coming together to support him, but a lot of it is just like that mixed bag of like, it's never usually that clear cut. It's not always a happy ending. It's just like sometimes your parents say they accept you and then also don't.
Yeah. I mean, and Jake's story really is a positive one, where, when his parents are being interviewed, his mom gets so choked up, and you can see that she's overcome with regret. And, I just found myself going, and feels proud, because that's how Jake feels about them, right? Like, I think she could look at these other families and go, I may not have handled it well, but it could be a whole lot worse. Yep. It just is really, really nice end to kind of see these, like, these touching last moments where everyone does get, like, some sort of resolution here. And I ended up learning that Reverend Gene Robinson is a frequent guest preacher at a church here in DC, which is amazing.
Oh.
And that is when I was like, maybe I'll visit. And then I just thought, Christianity, again, just a little too serious for me.
It's such a downer.
Yeah. So Aaron, what did you think about this one?
I mean, I liked it, right? It gives you an insight into the queer experience that like, honestly, all people who are, practicing religious folks should have to watch, like, just so that way, like, you get what it is like to be an out and closeted queer person in religious communities in the United States. Like, I feel like seeing this, like, it makes you confront the reality of what your religion is asking you to do, and, like, makes you really think, like, hey, should I be going along with this? Should I be supporting institutions that are forcing people to endure completely unnecessary suffering? There's some good moments of levity. I mean, I love that cartoon, but it was sad, frankly.
It definitely was. Yeah, I appreciated the moments of levity. I do feel like this documentary pulled not a single punch and gave us uplifting stories, stories that were kind of in between, and then, like, outright depressing stories, but right? Especially of queer youth living under conservative Christianity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm glad we watched this, but I am excited for Josh's recommendation, which I will be putting in the podcast now. And you all will be able to hear our great reactions to our much lighter next episode. Josh, do you want to tell Michael and I real quick? I know you're having a busy night today, but will you just real quick tell Michael and me what you're recommending for next week?
Yeah, so unlike my brother, I am picking a very heavy piece for us to deal with. I am putting out the recommendation, the Velocipaster,
Yeah.
a man of the
What?
claw.
Your face.
What?
Michael, just type in Velocipaster. It's spelled like you think. Just type that into Google.
Oh my God. What are
Yeah.
you putting us through?
That was my reaction too when I realized. I was like, oh,
Uh,
well, thanks,
if
Josh.
if you're listening to this, please Google Velocipaster, because there are three ninjas, a priest who has scaly skin and claws, and a giant velociraptor wearing a priest outfit on it.
So our next episode is going to have a 3-drink minimum.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Michael, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Michael's Diamonds.
You can find Josh at Green History. You can find me at Aaron SXL. You can also follow the podcast at MBF and me on Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, which is my brother's friend, and me. Like, comment, and subscribe as always. And if you don't, well, we'll cry, but it's okay to cry because even Jesus wept. We'll see you next week.